Longtime viewers of Channel 5 know the name Steve Sprague. Steve was a reporter for News Center 5 for 16 years until he moved to North Carolina in 2005.
And before that, Steve was a local radio reporter. That's when he became part of the story of the Bridgewater Triangle.
The spring of 1979 proved to be the most active period of documented UFO sightings in the history of the Bridgewater Triangle region. A number of news outlets and law enforcement agencies were flooded with reports of large, low-flying UFOs. During that time, former WHDH reporters Jerry Lopes and Steve Sprague claimed to have witnessed what is arguably the most famous UFO sighting to occur within the Bridgewater Triangle.
Jerry Lopes and I worked at WHDH Radio, and we were heading down to the Raynham dog track, and when we got off 24 onto 106, I noticed this really bright light over the tree line, and the light was coming closer and closer and getting bigger and bigger. And I remember saying to Jerry, "What is that over there?" So we pulled his vehicle over, and all of a sudden the stars blotted out in the shape of an arrow as this thing passed overhead.
Ironically, I'm a big baseball fan. It looked like a baseball home plate, and there were a series of lights on it.
And it was very, very wide. Perhaps the width of now, we'd say 5 747s wing to wing.
It looked like it had a little cord or something hanging off it, and sparks were coming off of it. I almost felt like I could throw a rock at the thing. It seemed that close to me.
This was pretty much the shape of it. And this thing passed overhead like this. For me, what first attracted me was this light that kind of came into our field of vision, just like that. And as this thing passed overhead, it just kept coming and coming and coming. And the light kept getting bigger and bigger.
I'm an Air Force veteran. I've been in the Air Force for 4.5 years. I've been around a number of different planes, and I said to Steve, "That's not one of ours." And it just hovered there for a minute. It looked like it was over a little bit of a field, and the next thing you know, it just kind of took off.
We continued on to the dog track, and most of the conversation that evening was, what did we see? Up to that point, I had been 100% skeptic. I thought anybody who ever saw these things, they were either crazy or publicity hounds, or there was just something wrong with them in their head altogether. What I didn't realize at the time was that a lot more people had seen it than just Jerry and I.
Interestingly, over the course of the next week, there were a series of spottings, different sightings. It was reported in the papers, reported on the radio station, and at that point, Steve and I decided to come forward and say, hey, we actually saw something.
A couple of days later, an article appears in the Brockton Enterprise. And not only does it have interviews with Jerry and I, but quite a number of other folks in and around the Randolph area who had seen it. But they've got the staff artist take all of our recollections and put together a drawing, an artist rendition, which looked pretty much like this.
So great to see Steve again. Joining us now, the co-directors of the Bridgewater Triangle, Cadieux and Manny Famolare. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for
having us. So let's start with what drew you to the subject to begin with.
Well, growing up as a kid, I was into the unusual. I loved the TV show Unsolved Mysteries. So we had a family friend that had told me about some weird things happening in and around East Bridgewater, the town I was living in. So I remember going to the library, and I heard about Bigfoot sightings and UFO sightings, and I was only a kid. And growing up around the same time, I was into my parents' VHS camera. I loved taking it wherever I went. And I remember saying to a friend, I want to make a movie on this one day. And this is really an interesting thing. I mean, Bigfoot, we were only kids. And I will admit, as a kid, we all went out there looking for Bigfoot. We had baseball bats and hockey sticks and everything. We didn't fight them, but we went out there. And that's what drew me to it eventually. When I grew older, I said, well, now I'm older, and I want to try to get the videography equipment, and I want to try to make this film. And then that's when I met Aaron, and I also found out that he was doing a documentary, and I said, well, there's no sense of two of us doing it, so we got together, and we started doing it.
So I'm curious, now that you've done the research and you've done the work on the film, are you believers in paranormal activity or in the Bridgewater Triangle itself?
I went into this project probably a 99% skeptic, and I came out of this project still probably a 95, 96% skeptic. But there are a couple stories that we feature in the film, Steve Sprague's being one of them, that really makes me take a step back and say, oh, what's really going on here? It is kind of interesting.
Tell us about the Native American connection to all of this.
Well, King Philip's War, for people that don't know about it, was the bloodiest war on a per capita basis in American history. So there is a theory that the negative energies from that conflict are what basically left a stain in southeastern Massachusetts and are a possible cause of the strange activity within the Bridgewater Triangle. We present it in the film simply as a theory, nothing more than a theory, but it is something that people talk about.
Manny, what do you think?
I think that there is something special about the area. Everybody has their own theories as to what it could be. We may never know the answer to it. It could be hundreds of years back, thousands of years back. We don't know. But there is something that draws these stories out, and they stay consistent. And I said before that the best stories come from people that have never heard of the Bridgewater Triangle. These are the people that have told you that, you know what, I did see something, or I saw some weird light in the Hockomock Swamp. And you say, have you ever heard of the Bridgewater Triangle? And they say, no, what is that? These are the stories that I feel are the best ones. They're believable.
Most validity.
And where can people see the documentary?
We have 2 screenings coming up, one on Friday night at a small venue in Bridgewater called Uplifting Connections. We have another screening that was actually supposed to be last night and was postponed to January 8th at the Alley Theater in Middleborough, Massachusetts. To get more information on those, they can go to our website, thebridgewatertriangledocumentary.com, and click on upcoming screenings.
Great. Thank you so much.
Great.
Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you very much for having us.
Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.